Have you ever trusted someone so deeply that their betrayal didn't just break your heart, it shook your identity? What if the person who always smiles, always shows up, and always says the right thing is quietly rooting against you? And here's the hard truth. Some people don't stab you in the back. They hold your hand while doing it. So how do we protect our peace without turning cold? Let's get this straight. Not everyone who's kind is trustworthy. Some people wear loyalty like a mask, and underneath, there's jealousy, control, manipulation. It's not always easy to see, especially when the relationship is long-standing, familiar, maybe even comfortable. But Stoic wisdom reminds us, your peace of mind is your responsibility. And part of that is choosing who gets access to your energy, your time, your inner world. This video isn't about building walls, it's about building wisdom. We are going to walk through 9 types of people who don't deserve your trust, no matter how charming, helpful, or long-standing their presence may be in your life. And no, this isn't bitterness, this is clarity. Because trust isn't something you hand out like a flyer. It's sacred. And the ones who deserve it are the ones who show up with consistency, not convenience. If you've ever felt confused, drained, or even quietly betrayed by someone you let in, you're not alone, and you're not powerless. Once you know what to look for, everything starts to make sense. So hit that subscribe button, take a breath, and let's walk through this together. Because sometimes protecting your peace starts with one powerful decision, deciding who doesn't belong in your inner circle. Let's get started. They're not the villains in movies. They don't come into your life with red flags flying and sirens blaring. No, the manipulative person often enters quietly, thoughtful, attentive. They remember your coffee order. They ask about your dreams. They show up just when you need a boost. And that's what makes them so dangerous, because it doesn't feel like manipulation at first. It feels like care. But behind the well-timed compliments, the over-helpful gestures, and the constant attention, something more subtle is happening. They're taking mental notes. Every time you share something vulnerable, they're storing it. Every time you react emotionally, they're studying it. Because for them, kindness isn't generosity, it's leverage. The manipulative individual thrives on emotional access. They don't demand control, they make you hand it over willingly. I've seen this happen to someone close. A friend got into a relationship with a woman who seemed endlessly supportive in the beginning. She texted sweet notes, remembered everything he said, showed up with surprise coffees and "you've got this" messages. But months in, that same attention became surveillance. She started using his words against him. "You said you hated that job. Why are you applying there? Remember when you told me about your father? That explains why you're so cold." It got darker, subtler. He started shrinking. He began asking for permission to feel, to speak, to act. This is how manipulation works, not with force, but with finesse. It doesn't shout, it whispers. And the more you doubt yourself, the more power they gain. That's why awareness is everything. Stoic wisdom teaches that while we can't control what others do, we can always control what we allow. Marcus Aurelius said, "If it's not right, don't do it. If it's not true, don't say it." That includes how we allow others to shape our reality. And Epictetus reminds us to protect the parts of ourselves that are sacred. Our thoughts, our peace, our sense of truth. So how do you know if you're dealing with a manipulator? Ask yourself, do I feel guilty after most conversations with this person, even if I didn't do anything wrong? Do I feel the need to over-explain myself, to be understood? Do I feel like I'm slowly losing the ability to decide for myself without their input? If yes, you're not overthinking. You're sensing something real. And the solution isn't always confrontation. In fact, manipulators thrive in conflict they can twist. The most powerful thing you can do is reclaim your center. Set boundaries like stone. Don't hand over your emotional diary to someone who's proven they'll use it against you. Speak clearly. Act from intention, not from fear. And if needed, walk away, not to hurt them, but to heal yourself. This isn't about being unforgiving. It's about being wise, because trust is sacred, and it's not meant for people who use it as a tool to weaken you. It's for those who help you rise, not shrink. And once you take back the power that was slowly taken from you, you'll realize how strong you were all along, just waiting to be unhooked from someone else's strings. So stay alert, stay grounded, and remember, silence, distance, and clarity are sometimes the most loving things you can give. Not to them, but to yourself. Let's keep going. Part 2 is next. You've probably met this person. You share something you're proud of. Maybe a small win, a new idea, a dream you've been building. And instead of support, you're met with a sigh, a raised eyebrow, or a backhanded remark. That's cute, but have you thought about how unrealistic it is? Or, back in my day, we did it better. These aren't critiques offered to help you grow. They're quiet jabs, dressed as wisdom, designed to chip away at your confidence one comment at a time. This is the perpetual critic. And what makes them so exhausting isn't just the negativity, it's the constancy. No matter what you do, it's never quite right. There's always a flaw to highlight, a risk to exaggerate, a reason why your progress isn't impressive enough. At first, you might try to reason with them, to prove yourself, to seek their approval. But the more you try, the more you realize it's not about your work. It's about their need to stay above it. I remember working with a colleague like this, older, respected, well-established. At first, I took her remarks as high standards. That idea's too idealistic. We tried that in '98. It didn't work. You should stick to what's proven. I listened. I adjusted. I shrank a little, until I realized it wasn't about standards. It was about fear. Fear of being left behind. Fear of becoming irrelevant. And that fear was disguised as condescension. Here's what Stoic wisdom teaches us. People are allowed to speak, but we are not obligated to carry their opinions. Epictetus put it perfectly. It's not things that disturb us, but our judgment of them. The criticism isn't what causes the damage. It's how much power we give it inside our minds. That's where discernment comes in. So the next time you hear someone shoot down your idea or undermine your effort, pause and ask, is this feedback helping me grow, or is it simply draining me? If it's not constructive, if it's not offered with clarity and respect, you have the right to let it pass through you, without explanation, without reaction. You are not required to absorb what doesn't serve you. Set internal boundaries. You don't have to fight. You don't even have to explain. Just ground yourself in your values, your clarity, your why. Because not everyone's opinion deserves a seat at the table of your mind. And the people who constantly criticize, they're often fighting their own silent war with self-worth. You don't owe anyone the power to dull your light simply because they haven't found theirs. So keep shining, keep growing. And when the critics speak, listen only if it lifts you. Otherwise, keep walking. Because in the end, your worth is not measured by their noise, but by your ability to move forward anyway. Let's move on to part 3. It's time to talk about the person who always knows too much about everyone else, the gossip. You know that moment when someone leans in just a little closer, drops their voice, and starts a sentence with, "Did you hear about?" And suddenly you're pulled into a story that isn't theirs to tell. At first, it feels like connection, like you're being let in on something secret, something personal, something that proves you're trusted. But what if I told you that kind of conversation is often the beginning of betrayal, and not the kind you'll notice right away? The gossip is one of the most deceptively dangerous people in any circle. They don't come off as cruel. In fact, they often seem charming, warm, like the social glue of every group. They remember birthdays, know everyone's business, and always seem to have the inside scoop. But here's the truth. They don't just collect stories, they distribute them. And if they're telling you something about someone else that clearly wasn't theirs to share, you need to stop and ask, what are they doing with my story when I'm not in the room? I once lived in a neighborhood where there was a woman exactly like this. She was at every gathering, always smiling, always talking. Everyone knew her. She knew everything. One day, during a casual walk, I shared something small, nothing earth-shattering, just something personal I hadn't told many people. 2 days later, I heard a twisted version of it coming back to me through a neighbor I barely knew. It had been passed around, reworded, reshaped, and served like entertainment. And in that moment, I didn't just feel exposed, I felt foolish. See, gossipers don't trade in facts, they trade in attention. Their currency isn't truth, it's reaction. Psychologically, gossip fills a void. It gives them a sense of importance, a momentary spotlight, a way to feel like they matter in a story that's not their own. But what it really reveals is avoidance, of self-awareness, of personal growth, of meaningful connection. And this is where Stoic wisdom brings us back to clarity. Epictetus said, "Notice if conversations tend to revolve around other people's lives." Second, don't participate. You don't need to confront or criticize, you just need to remove yourself from the loop. Change the subject. Excuse yourself. Keep your energy clean. And most importantly, be very careful what you share with someone who speaks easily about everyone else. Because trust, once broken, doesn't just hurt, it costs peace. Your stories, your struggles, your successes, they are sacred. They belong in the hands of those who protect, not parade them. And when someone turns those moments into casual conversation, they're showing you exactly who they are. Not a friend, but a funnel. A conduit through which your privacy becomes public curiosity. So protect your space. Stay grounded. You don't have to be cold. You just have to be clear. And remember, in a world where gossip feels like connection, choosing silence is an act of self-respect. Let's keep moving. Next, we'll talk about the people who only show you when life is going well. The fair weather friends. Stay with me. They show up when you're smiling, when life is smooth, when your wins are loud and the sun is shining. They laugh with you, toast your successes, cheer you on when the lights are bright. But the moment clouds gather, the moment you're down or silent or struggling, they disappear. No text, no call, just distance. That's the fair weather friend. And while they might not hurt you with intention, their absence in your darkest moments says more than any insult ever could. At first, it's hard to notice. These people are warm, fun, magnetic. They're there for celebrations. They make you feel liked, visible, even loved. But then life does what life does. You hit a rough patch. Grief, illness, failure, burnout, and suddenly the energy shifts. You become too heavy, too complicated, too much. And they quietly fade, convincing themselves that stepping back is kindness. But the truth is, they were never here for you. They were here for the feeling of being around you at your brightest. One of the clearest public examples of this happened with Robin Williams, a man who lit up the world, who gave laughter freely, who was loved by millions. At the height of his fame, he was surrounded by people. Everyone wanted to be close. But when depression, addiction, and illness took hold, many of those same people vanished. His circle got smaller. His support got quieter. The world loved his laughter, but didn't know what to do with his pain. That's not just his story. It's a mirror for how society often treats those who are no longer easy to be around. See, fair-weather friends aren't necessarily cruel. They just lack depth. They haven't built the emotional muscles required to sit with discomfort, to hold space for someone else's pain without trying to fix it or flee from it. Psychologically, they're avoidant, trained to chase comfort, not character. And while their absence might not come with betrayal, it still leaves a scar. Stoic philosophy offers a beautiful remedy here. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "It is in our power to live a life of virtue, regardless of the conditions we find ourselves in." In other words, your emotional steadiness cannot depend on who's in the room. It must come from within. Because when hardship comes, and it always will, the people who vanish weren't your foundation to begin with. Because true friendship isn't measured by how loud someone cheers, but by how quietly they stay when everything else fades. Let's keep going. Next up, we'll talk about the one who always makes it about them, the narcissist. Stay with me. They start off making you feel like the most important person in the room. You feel seen, validated, maybe even a little lucky to be in their orbit. They listen intently, ask about your life, praise your strengths, make you feel like you matter. But somewhere along the way, something shifts. The spotlight, which once felt like it was shining with you, slowly turns until it's all about them. That's how the narcissist operates, not with overt harm at first, but with subtle redirection of attention, empathy, and connection, until your role in their world is no longer about mutual respect, but about feeding their image. You begin to notice the pattern. Every story circles back to their achievement. Every moment of your success becomes a moment for their discomfort. And every time you need something from them, support, presence, space, they vanish emotionally or redirect the conversation to remind you how hard they have it. Narcissists don't need a relationship. They need an audience. They don't want connection. They want control. And the moment you stop giving them the energy they crave, the warmth fades, replaced by cold disinterest or subtle devaluation. Psychologically, this isn't just self-absorption. It's emotional extraction. Narcissists feed on attention like oxygen, using charm as a tool, empathy as a mask. They're often doubting their worth, shrinking their needs just to avoid being dismissed again. They start asking, "Am I too much?" when really, they've simply stopped performing. That's when the narcissist withdraws, not because they're done with you, but because you stopped serving their script. This is where Stoic wisdom becomes your anchor. Epictetus said, "Know first who you are, and then adorn yourself accordingly." Translation: build your self-worth from the inside out. Because the moment you start needing validation from someone who only gives it conditionally, you hand over the reins of your peace. And the narcissist knows exactly how to keep you reaching for approval that was never real to begin with. So how do you deal with it? First, stop trying to earn what should be given freely. Respect, attention, care. If those things only show up when you're feeding someone else's ego, they're not real. Second, stay grounded in your own values. Know who you are when no one is clapping. And third, if the pattern persists, detach. Not out of anger, but out of self-respect. Detachment here isn't cruel, it's clarity. You're not walking away from someone. You're walking back toward yourself. Because the truth is, narcissists rarely change. But you don't have to stay in their orbit. You don't have to shrink for someone who refuses to see your full size. And the day you stop performing, stop pleading, stop pouring into a cup that only leaks, something powerful happens. You reclaim your center. You choose truth over attention. And you remember that the loudest love isn't always the truest. Sometimes it's the quiet respect you give yourself when no one else does. Let's keep going, because in the next part, we'll meet someone who uses praise not to lift you, but to control you, the flatterer. Stay with me. There's a kind of praise that feels warm, effortless, almost too perfect. The words land just right. The timing, impeccable. The person saying it always knows exactly what to compliment, exactly when to say it, and exactly how to make you feel seen. And at first, it feels good. Who doesn't enjoy being appreciated? But if you pause, really pause, you might start to wonder, why now? Why this? And what do they want next? That's the moment when admiration stops feeling genuine and starts sounding strategic. Flatterers are experts at emotional currency. They understand the power of validation, and they use it not to build real connection, but to influence your decisions, soften your boundaries, or gain your favor. Their praise isn't about you. It's about access, because if they can make you feel special, they believe you'll be more likely to say yes, to trust faster, to hesitate less when they ask for something. Compliments become their leverage, not their language of care. There's a story from early Hollywood that captures this perfectly. An actor rose quickly through the ranks, not just because of talent, but because of timing. He knew which producers to compliment, which directors to charm. His words were velvet, always flattering, always perfectly aimed. And it worked, for a while. He landed roles, climbed fast. But when the power shifted, when some of those people lost their clout, he disappeared from their lives like smoke. No loyalty, no depth, just strategy. And when people realized his admiration had never been real, his career faded just as quickly as it rose. See, the problem with flattery is that it can feel indistinguishable from sincere praise until it doesn't. Until you start noticing that the compliments always show up when someone needs something. Until you catch yourself craving their approval just a little too much. That's when it becomes dangerous, not because praise is bad, but because it's being used to manipulate, not to connect. Stoic wisdom offers a grounding perspective here. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Receive without pride, let go without attachment." That applies not just to loss, but to praise. Take the compliment. Be gracious. But don't build your identity around it, because the moment your self-worth becomes dependent on external admiration, you become vulnerable to anyone who knows how to push that button. So how do you protect yourself? Start by asking, do their compliments come with expectations? Does their praise feel earned or automatic? Do they still respect you when you say no? If the answer feels shaky, trust your instinct. You don't need to reject all kind words, but you do need to know which ones are real and which ones are rehearsed. The key is anchoring your value internally. Be kind, be open, but build your worth from the inside out, not from how brightly others reflect you, but from how clearly you see yourself. Because when your foundation is strong, flattery has no power. It becomes what it should have always been, a nice gesture, not a currency of control. Let's move to the next type, the one who smiles when you succeed, but clenches inside. The envious. Stay with me. It gets real. You've probably felt it before, that strange discomfort after sharing something good in your life. You got the promotion, finished the degree, hit the goal, made the leap. You told a friend, expecting excitement, encouragement, maybe a little celebration. And what did you get? A tight smile. A delayed, "That's great," followed by a quick comparison to their cousin's job or a shift in conversation that subtly pulls the spotlight back onto them. You felt the drop in energy. You felt the invisible recoil. And you probably walked away asking yourself, why do I feel small after sharing something big? That's envy. And when it hides behind politeness, it's harder to spot, but even more toxic. The envious person often isn't openly bitter. They may not roll their eyes or speak negatively. No, they'll congratulate you just enough to seem supportive. But their words won't match their energy, and their presence won't match your moment, because deep down, your success doesn't inspire them. It unsettles them. It makes them feel behind, less than, forgotten. And rather than process that feeling, they try to shrink you just enough to feel tall again. I've seen this happen in both quiet friendships and loud professional circles. You'll share a win, and instead of "tell me more," you get "must be nice," or "I've been meaning to do something like that too." It's always subtle, never mean-spirited on the surface. But over time, those moments accumulate, and if you're not careful, you start shrinking your celebrations to fit their comfort. You dull your shine to protect their ego. And eventually, you stop sharing altogether. That's when envy wins, not because it attacked you, but because it trained you to dim yourself. Stoicism offers us clarity in moments like this. Marcus Aurelius wrote about anchoring ourselves internally, unmoved by either praise or resentment. And Epictetus reminds us, just as we must not be ruled by others' criticism, we must not be flattered or shaken by their subtle discomfort. Because envy isn't about you, it's about them. It's about their unhealed belief that someone else's light dims their own. So how do we navigate this? Not with confrontation, not with silence either, but with discernment. Notice who genuinely shows up for your growth, who asks with sincerity, who listens without redirecting, and who doesn't flinch when you speak with pride. Those are your people. For the rest, it doesn't mean you cut them off, but it does mean you stop feeding them pieces of your progress that they haven't earned the right to carry. You don't owe your full story to every listener, and you definitely don't need to apologize for evolving beyond the version of you they were more comfortable with. If your growth makes someone uneasy, let that be their work to do, not your responsibility to solve. Keep your posture, keep your peace, and most of all, keep shining. Because your success isn't a threat, it's a testament, a signal of what's possible. And the ones meant to walk with you, they won't flinch, they'll rise too. Let's keep going. Next, we'll talk about a heavy presence in many people's lives, the person who's always the victim. Stay tuned. We've all known someone like this. The moment something goes wrong, they don't just share the experience, they embody it. Every conversation becomes a loop of what happened to them. How unfair life is, how nobody understands, and how nothing ever works out. At first, your instinct is empathy. You want to help, you listen, you give advice, you offer your time, your support, even your energy. But as the weeks or months go on, something shifts. You start to feel exhausted, maybe even guilty, like no matter how much you offer, it's never enough. That's when you realize this person doesn't want a solution. They want sympathy without responsibility. The perpetual victim isn't just someone going through a tough time. We all go through pain, setbacks, unfairness. The difference is, most of us want to move forward. The victim-minded person, they stay there. Because that role of the misunderstood, mistreated, unlucky one has become part of their identity. It gives them something to hold on to, something to blame. And the problem isn't just their mindset, it's what it does to the people who care about them. I've watched friends pour months of emotional labor into someone who simply refused to change. Every suggestion was met with, "That won't work." Every moment of hope immediately deflected. Over time, you're not just supporting them, you're being slowly pulled into their world of helplessness. And if you're not careful, you start questioning your own strength, your own optimism, your own sanity. Stoicism offers us something powerful here. Epictetus said, "You may not control events, but you can always control how you respond." That includes how you respond to someone else's endless despair. And more importantly, it includes protecting your mind from becoming enslaved to someone else's emotional chaos. Because here's the truth: you can love someone, support someone, and still set limits. Compassion doesn't require sacrifice of your own peace. If you're constantly drained after being with someone, if you feel like you're walking on emotional eggshells, afraid to be positive around them, or pressured to fix something they refuse to take ownership of, that's a signal. Not to abandon them, but to recalibrate. To help from a distance if needed. To remind them, gently but firmly, that healing requires participation. And you cannot carry both your life and theirs on your back. The Stoics would say, your responsibility is not to change others, but to guard your own clarity, your own resilience, your own soul. So offer a hand, but don't get pulled into the quicksand. You can care without becoming consumed. You can support without becoming responsible. Because sometimes the most loving thing you can do is to stop trying to rescue someone who doesn't want to be free. Let's keep moving. Next, we'll look at someone who always watches, always measures, always judges, and how to stay steady when they do. Stay with me. There's a certain kind of silence that falls in the room when someone speaks with authority. Not the grounded kind, but the sharp, narrow, superior kind. You know the type. The person who watches others with a quiet smirk, ready to label, ready to measure, ready to point out where everyone else has gone wrong. They don't ask questions. They don't seek to understand. They pronounce verdicts. and they carry themselves like life appointed them judge, jury, and moral compass. The judgmental person doesn't just critique behavior, they assign identity. One misstep, one flaw, one bad day, and suddenly you're lazy, naive, reckless, immature. They don't pause to ask what led to the moment. They don't consider what it's like to stand in someone else's shoes. Why would they? In their world, being right matters more than being kind. I once witnessed this at a local event where people were invited to share personal stories of resilience. One woman stood up, honest, vulnerable, courageous, and shared about her years of struggling with debt, single parenting, and slowly rebuilding her life. The room was still, listening with respect, until one man interrupted, loud, dismissive. He criticized her financial decisions, questioned her priorities, and wrapped it all in a tone that said, "I would have done it better." The energy shifted instantly, from empathy to discomfort, from inspiration to defense. That's what judgment does. It doesn't build, it shuts down. But here's the deeper truth. Harsh judgment rarely comes from wisdom. It often comes from fear, from insecurity, from a desperate need to feel superior in a world that feels increasingly out of control. When someone constantly judges others, what they're really doing, your voice, your truth, just to stay acceptable. So how do we respond? First, don't internalize it. Their judgment says more about their mind than your character. Second, don't engage in the same game. You don't need to defend yourself to someone who's not listening. Third, stay rooted in who you are. Your evolution doesn't need approval, and your flaws don't need permission. Remember, we're all flawed, we're all trying, and the most powerful people aren't the ones who sit above others. They're the ones who sit beside them, without pretending to be better. That's where trust begins. Not in perfection, but in presence. Let's close this out together. The final part is next. Let's talk about how to protect your energy from all 9 of these types and build a life where peace isn't just protected, it's prioritized. Stay with me. So here's the truth most of us need to hear. This video was never just about 9 types of people. It's not just a list of red flags, it's a mirror, a reflection of the boundaries you've been too kind to set. A reminder that protecting your peace isn't about becoming cold or cynical. It's about becoming conscious. Because your energy, your time, your emotional space, those are sacred. And not everyone deserves a seat at your table, even if they've been sitting there for years. Philosophy teaches us something powerful. You don't control others, you only control how you respond. You can't fix their patterns. You can't rescue someone who doesn't want help. You can't convince someone to respect your worth if they haven't discovered their own. But you can choose. You can choose what you allow, who you trust, where you place your emotional investment, and when to quietly, confidently step back. Setting boundaries isn't rejection, it's alignment. It's saying, this is who I am, and this is what I will and won't allow around me. It's not unkind. It's the highest form of self-respect. And it's how you make space for the right people, the ones who show up with consistency, who don't need to dim your light to feel seen, who love you in your joy and stay present in your pain. So let me ask you, what relationship in your life needs more clarity? Who drains your spirit more than they support your growth? Don't ignore the answers. Let them guide you. Because when you start choosing peace over pressure, truth over tolerance, and boundaries over burnout. You don't lose people, you lose illusions. And that's the beginning of becoming free. Thank you for walking through this journey with me. If this message spoke to something in you, share it, reflect on it, act on it, because your peace was never meant to be negotiable. It was meant to be protected. I'll see you in the next one. Stay strong, stay clear, and stay true to your light.